Hello and welcome to Fierce. This program celebrates the diversity of LGBTIQ identities and perspectives. Fierce is produced in Bundjalung country at 2NCR Lismore and can also be heard on podcast at fiercefm.podbean.com and in New Zealand on Fresh FM, as well as all over Australia through the Community Radio Network.
Fierce FM on Spotify and YouTube.
I want to honour the traditional owners of the lands where you are living. They took care of these lands for thousands and thousands of years and then shared this land with us at great cost to their own lives. I want to thank them for the care they have given and continue to give, to sit on the earth, listen and care for country. I also want to thank the fairies and crones who came before us in history to fight for our human right to love fiercely.
Former Fierce producer and presenter Glamazon, 11 Greenstones, currently living in Maidu and Miwok country, which is on the western slopes of the Sierra Nevada mountains in Northern California. Is it bigger and better over there?
Bigger, but that doesn't make it better. I mean, I am a size queen, Hunty, but it does not follow that bigger is better. The scale has an impact on communities because there's more people. But where I live right now, we're under lockdown. It's not like any of those people are getting together. And I am really looking forward to being able to go to BDSM and leather events, queer events. That's definitely part of what attracted me to come to America and explore those communities, is what does the scale offer people? Doesn't make it better. Because you're not here, Peter.
Oh, I'm here and you should be here.
You're an American now. Do you speak with an accent, 11?
I do. I speak with an Australian accent.
What about a New Zealand accent? Because originally you're from there.
Much to my mum and dad's disgust, I lost my New Zealand accent and started sounding like an Australian a good number of years ago now. I was in Australia for the better part of 20 years. I did consciously take some steps to help me convert to American, but being the fresh meat, it's exotic. And I think that one gets better treated. So I didn't try to assimilate too much.
That's reminding me, 11, of being over in America in the 90s. Alabama, we were in New Orleans and we were in New York. I'd go out to the Jungle Bar or to Splash and straight away I'd pick up the hottest men just by talking. In that 1 week in New York, I dated a Christian rock star, somebody who did a video clip for Janet Jackson. So fresh meat in America.
Peter, you were just hot.
Alien. I was never attractive.
You were just such hot stuff.
But you were.
You are beautiful. You are such hot stuff. I bet they couldn't keep their mouths closed. Jaws dropping to the floor everywhere you went.
Well, it's not my experience, but my experience of you in Lismore was that you were that. You were everything. You were
Isn't it funny, the difference between how we perceive ourselves? Not that I was sitting at home alone every Friday night, but I never thought of myself as a stud or a slut, somebody who was out and about in that way.
Well, certainly an ethical slut.
Oh, very much so. The ethical part is very important to me, and I don't think that I've really explored non-monogamy and polyamory really to get my slut on. I tried. What is most important to me is the way the love I feel for people is curtailed by a monogamous assumption and the heteropatriarchy, and the way that I have been socialized to support ideas of scarcity, for example, that are really rooted in capitalism and empire and patriarchy, and trying to unlearn those as much as I'm able to. The greatest benefit for me of non-monogamy and polyamory has been that personal work, and then within community or the political work to address how we relate to each other and what relationships mean. And the idea that love is abundant. We are better together. I would like to be a better slut. I've looked at people that I've either been in relationship with or known and just gone, wow, you are so confident. You can just strut around the pool table and pick up anybody or anything. And I think my slut skills are better now than they were as I was growing up. But I am certainly not a paragon of sluttery. More ethical, I would hope. I certainly have made many mistakes and I hope to make less of those. Like whenever I finally grow up. My happiness is more available to me when I think about the nature of love and how we love each other. Yeah, there are forces of evil and death that would have us think that this one's mine and only mine and get away. And challenging those has been really valuable. How about for you? I'm always very curious about people who live, as I perceive it, outside, I'll say the heteropatriarchy, but I mean, I could call it the military-industrial complex, you know, who have looked at the overculture and have an appreciation of what's available to us when we reject those teachings and follow others. So I see that you sit outside of that, and yet you're engaged to be married. And marriage as a whole shebang is something that I don't understand. And while I think that discrimination before the law that prevents not opposite sex couples from getting married, absolutely appalling, and do whatever you like. And I'm more of a just get the state out of our relationships. What's it got to do with them anyway? Who cares what they actually think and whether they approve of us and all of that? I want us to fight for something way better than that. But I see you and Jason embracing that and wanting that. And I'm wondering, I mean, I know you to be one of the most romantic critters that I know. Oh. Is it that's attractive to marriage? Like, what, you know, what's your angle?
Partly I'm just not as hot as you, Eleven, so I'm being an ethical slut doesn't work because nobody wanted me. But also, I didn't want them. In Sydney, I was a big slut. You know, it's just so easy. You just walk down the street and you've got options to just go around the corner or bring them home or whatever and have a good time sexually, like sport. But really that whole time I was boyfriend hunting, looking in all the wrong places for love. You know, I had a couple of experiences in relationship that didn't work out, but I've always wanted that. So I take responsibility for being indoctrinated by Disney in my culture, you know, totally. Since a little boy, I wanted to be Cinderella finding Prince Charming. I get it. I don't believe in the Easter Bunny. I don't believe in Santa Claus. And I don't believe in Prince Charming. But Jason is perfect for me at the moment. I'm hoping, I want it to last forever. And with each new commitment that Jason and I make, dating to being boyfriends to then moving in, it just got better and better and better. Our connection, our ease living together, our joy at sharing life and sex too, it just gets better and better and better, which is different because usually over a couple of years, things start to fade, straying eyes. Whereas being monogamous really suits me because I'm keen to go deeper and deeper into that intimacy and what that brings. The main thing is choice. Everyone being able to do what they want to do. People should be free with equality to be able to do what they want to do.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I've been thinking more about equity than equality. A couple of kids trying to peer over the fence at a Kylie Minogue concert because they haven't got the money to get in. One's a metre tall and the other one's a metre 20 centimetres, but they both find a milk crate. They both found the same thing, but that one who's a little bit shorter still can't quite see over the fence. That kid doesn't need the same as their friend, and I don't need the right to be married because I'm not interested in it. But the people who want to be married need the right to be married. And I hear you saying things that are, in my mind, akin to marriage, and that is monogamy, a lifelong commitment, and that sort of stuff. And I really understand how intimacy deepens when people make a commitment for the long haul. That happens not just within couples, but within communities as well. As we build intimacy, we build trust. Adrienne Marie Brown, who was an author and a thinker, I think it was her who said, movements move at the speed of trust. When we were working together in QFAG, we did that show and it was a little bit racy. We did it at the Glitter Ball and it was fantastic. What happened there, because we were friends who had an affinity together, we already had some trust and we were able to get a little bit saucy and enjoy that part of each other with a basis of trust. I get you. I can see that marriage really does support that. I think that there are other ways to do that don't also have the history and the baggage of marriage.
Yeah, well, Jason and I were not worrying about a legal marriage because we don't really buy into any of that government crap. We don't like the government here at all. They're white supremacists, similar to what was happening in your country. So let's go into that because it's really up to us as white people to give up our privilege. I think even white people are becoming aware that actually I'm not white. I'm European of two different countries. Plus, I've been here and kind of not just white.
I do think that it's a social construct created at a particular time in history. It suited the powerful to have the category of whiteness created. Part of the reason that I was interested in visiting America is that it's my father's country. Because he filled out all the right paperwork when I was a kid, I can stay here as I choose to because I can wave a passport around. And that privilege was afforded to me by my American father. Now, when his father arrived with his Italian family, they weren't white. The Italians weren't white. And then whiteness changed. Some of the reading that I've been doing talks about how white was constructed at a time when it was important to separate different people into a caste system. Who's going to drive the slaves and who's going to be a slave. And so categories needed to be created, but that biologically the distinctions are not absolute. What was the advantage for my Italian ancestors becoming white? People who look at gender from a biological, scientific, queer theory kind of point of view can also say that about biological sex. We get to interrupt this binary or this categorization. Because you and I both speak about racism and white supremacy, we might have some answers to that question. Because both you and I are queer, we know what people might get being heterosexual that isn't available to people who aren't heterosexual. Like, we know what buy-in can make available to you. White supremacy is a white problem. What is it about me that I'm doing that? There's aspects of insecurity, personal and social, that lead us to that point. Am I going to be okay? Have I got enough? Will the people I love be all right? That we are accountable to people. We are accountable for people. They are our community. We belong together. And that sense of belonging is a really important part of that.
Racism or white supremacy is taught. We've all been indoctrinated in that. The only control we have over it is to look at our own thoughts and beliefs. Kids are taught very young about the difference, but they don't have an awareness of any sort of difference of colour or anything before they're taught that.
Katie Brooks is a British artist, a lesbian, and it speaks about the love that she has for another woman and how she's taught that that's sinful. There are people who will punish her for that. Still, she's just never going to let her go. And there's such strength in that. Very special to my lover and I.
Oh, Lord, He gonna bless my soul. Beat it out until you can't see the fold. Got love, but it's a sin, so I'm told that I gotta withhold. Oh, Lord, He gonna paint on it all. Melt me down till I forget where I fall. Got love, but it's a sin, so they call. God bless my soul. Oh, take me to the holy water, and beat me till the river runs cold. Now I could be the things that I order, but I ain't never gonna let her go. Oh, darling, but not what they saw. Just a number on a forbidden door. Why these people, they're afraid to see more, so they like to be sure. Oh, darling, you and me could be gold. Make love until the younger grow. Why these people keep on treating us cold. God bless their souls. Oh, take me to let her go.
You've been working with the Reclaiming Witches that embraces diversity and honours mystery.
I first encountered the Reclaiming Witch community in Australia. I took a class that was run by Rose Weaver, one of the core classes in reclaiming the elements: fire, air, water, earth, and spirit. And it was a really lovely feeling of fitting, right? But in an effortless kind of way. It was the threads of my anarchist ideas, eco-feminism, social justice, magic and mystery, and questions that had started bubbling up in me of a spiritual nature. Part of my body was sighing, like, oh, and it was lovely to sink into. And part of maybe my cynical brain was like, what the hell are you talking about, magic? What is this about? Because it was awkward and new. I was like, oh, I can't even believe I'm saying these words. What is this? When I came to America, I wanted some kind of festival. I had this idea that I was going to go to some big thing, like a fairy gathering, and I was going to meet all these extraordinary people, and then I would spend a full cycle of seasons traveling around, visiting them all. How wonderful. And I went to a Reclaiming Witch camp and met some extraordinary people, and I was delighted to spend some months living in Austin, Texas, at a little fairy enclave of tiny houses and a beautiful 2-bedroom little shack called The Holler with my friend Jaguar. Through Jaggy, I started going to Undoing White Supremacy Austin. There were some of the Reclaiming Witches that I had met at this camp, and there were these threads that were being woven together. And I noticed this crossover, and I went, here's this tradition that is rooted in social justice. And since then, there have been more and more and more of those threads woven into the fabric. And I'm part of an affinity group. We've been meeting for some months now, twice a month. We have conducted paths in Reclaiming Witch camps, or they might be offerings or workshops or rituals or meetings. We're not actually really sure what to call them, that look at harm and accountability around white supremacy and racism, and giving people an opportunity to look at accountability. Part of the work that I've been doing is in changing what's called the Principles of Unity, which is one of the core documents in Reclaiming, which is a very anarchic tradition, and these autonomous cells or covens within the worldwide mycelium have come together to make changes to this document that I remember when I first read it, my feeling was, oh, hell yes, this is exciting. It could tell me something about this group of people and the tradition and what their principles were, what the values were. And just recently, that document has been changed through this extraordinary process of consensus, where a group of Black, Indigenous, mixed race, people of colour, witches of colour within the community, said, we really need to look at the racism within this community. This is some bullshit going on. We need to change the Principles of Unity. And so just in the last week, the changes to that Principles of Unity happened, and Reclaiming is now explicitly an anti-racist tradition, a tradition that embraces a diversity of different tactics, but not only one of non-violence. BIPOC people and mixed race people within Reclaiming said, you know what, not all of us get the privilege of being peaceful. We don't have the luxury of being peaceful because we have to defend ourselves however we can. I'll call it an incantation or a spell casting or an intention setting or something, but the words were written and said that Reclaiming will centre and uplift the voices of BIPOC witches. And in my opinion, now the work begins, because we've set that intention, we've cast that spell, and now we have to back it up. In the same way that white folks all around the world have been socialised and indoctrinated into white supremacy and have internalised white superiority, mixed race folks, Black folks, white people, all of us all together, like we internalise this white supremacy. And it's a really exciting thing to be working at these intersections of magic and mystery and justice. I'm meeting some extraordinary people that I'm just so grateful to be in community with, mentors and elders in this work. I have so much to learn from, who inspire me and who love me, despite coronavirus, which is extraordinary. I don't really hold much to like the nations of America. And yet, if we look at North America as like a landmass, even if you want to look at it that way, not as a country, 450,000 people dead. And who are those dead? They are Indigenous people at rates that far exceed other people of colour, Black and Latinx people and other folks of colour, the poor, and the implications for what's happened, not just in terms of health and well-being, but also socially. If you think about education, when I was down in New Orleans, as I was, 30% of school children in New Orleans didn't have access to computers or the internet, and therefore were not getting any education. That's not the kids who were trying to wrestle one computer between a number of kids, or there was one laptop in the household and their parent was trying to work full time, or they could afford half a month's internet or not. This is just kids who had nothing. And I look at how it was handled in New Zealand. You know, I speak to my mum and dad regularly, and they talk about receiving up-to-date information every night by the person in leadership at that time, often in her pajamas or a tracky dacks, having just put her baby down. And people got to make decisions. And she said, we're going hard and we're going far. And I'm sure that there are a lot of people who were like, I don't know about this, and I don't want to be governed by you in this way, or maybe it's a big conspiracy, and all of that needs to be taken into consideration. And when I look back now at the months since the pandemic began, how things are in New Zealand, how things are even in Australia, and how it is here in America, I can see that being in a country where the rights of the individual is paramount above all else. There are 450,000 people dead. And there are so many other social implications, not just people dying, but the unemployment. Because America is invested in capitalism as an operating model, even medicine and healthcare operates on a business model. So if you don't have a job, your chances of having healthcare are pretty slim. I can hear concerns about tracking people on apps. The one case in New Zealand of community transmission that came about recently. I can also, at the same time, hear my dad going, yeah, but we knew where she had been in the last 3 days, and all of those people were able to be contacted. So I would like to think that these technologies are being used in support of people's health and well-being, and I want them to be. I've got no trust or faith or respect for the American model of government, particularly who was at the helm until recently. The negligence was really deadly.
The work that you're doing with the Reclaiming Witches, I love that word, immanence. I'm interested to know your relationship with that word. You know, the art of changing consciousness at will through spells or through intention.
It is an art form. I am affected. It changes my state. The worlds that I occupy are different forms of energy and matter given different forms. Me and that tree over there, and I don't mean this in like a metaphysical way, I mean it actually in a pretty earthed, grounded, scientific kind of way. I'm looking out my window at a tree now. We are both made up of carbon. We both have hydrogen, oxygen, iron, nitrogen. That amazing tree feeds in a completely different way than I do. That incredible creature can photosynthesize. Imagine being able to do that. It's like, oh, I'll take some sunlight and here's my chlorophyll. And I'm like, oh, there's all the sugars I need. I need to like go to the door or the garden, pick some things, cook some things, eat some things. This one, oh my God, if I am affected, and the way that my body is tingling, or I can feel a connection with people. And I've noticed this over Zoom. I was really surprised when I started meeting in ritual space, in sacred space with other witches to practice the magic. I can still feel it. It's like it's a thing. We're all doing it. And these other people are feeling it as well. And it's happening and we're all doing it. And we're connected through this digital code that's going on, but we're still doing it. What I do has an impact. And I can't always see that. And so I think that if I work to create energy towards justice and healing and transformation with other people on a new moon, and that we invoke our allies of earth and air and fire and water and spirit, if we call on their ancestors and descendants, if I ground myself between the stars and the earth, and if I join my heart and my will with other people, I believe that's actually what I'm doing.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Eleven, for coming back to Fierce. Love you. Have a stay fierce.
I hope so too, Peter. Yes, staying fierce.
Won't be divided right. to guide us rise. In hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here. In a hope, in prayer, we're right here. In a hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here. In hope, in prayer, we're right here, and we rise. All of the children rise. Elders with wisdom rise. Ancestors surround us rise. In a hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here. In a hope, in prayer, we're right here. In a hope, in prayer, we find
Thank you for
ourselves
listening to Fierce.
here. In
This
hope,
program celebrates the diversity of LGBTIQ identities and perspectives. Fierce is produced in Bunjalung Country at 2NCR Lismore and can also be heard on podcast at fiercefm.podbean.com and in New Zealand on Fresh FM, as well as all over Australia through the Community Radio Network.
Fierce FM on Spotify.